All right, welcome. This is the School District of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. We have been in closed session since 6:15. There's a few items out of closed session that I'm going to read to you pursuant of Statute 1985-1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, including hourly pay wages for admin assistants, food service bus drivers, and teaching assistants, licensed staff on the teacher pay scale steps and lanes, and supervisors of nutritional services, transportation, and building and grounds. The board voted unanimously on the following. The board granted hourly employees a $2 an hour increase effective with the fall payroll. One note on that, custodians were already approved back in February of 2021, so that was not included tonight. Board approved a $200 per cell increase on the teacher steps and lane schedule, and the board also approved supervisors and the 4 principals receiving an increase equivalent to a range between 2 and 3% per HR and district administrator review. So that was covered in closed session. We are on item 4, Pledge of Allegiance. Pat, would you care to lead us? To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are on item 5, recognition of visitors. Would anybody in the audience care to be recognized? Yep, and just for those in the audience, when you come up to the podium, just state your name and your township, please. Thank you. And if you're representing a group, that would, I pretty much assume that, but all right. Okay, thank you.
My name is Kelly Engeldinger, and I'm the City of Prescott. I guess I just want to state for my thoughts on masking or non-masking. I know that that's not possibly quite on the agenda yet, but I want to note that the CDC is making it a recommendation and not a mandate, and I would hope that the school would follow suit and not make it a mandate. It's great to see everybody's beautiful faces tonight and throughout the summer, and just looking at the social aspect for the last few months and how there has not been a spread. I beg you to not put that on unless you absolutely, without a doubt, have to. Meaning, if somebody mandates it again. A recommendation is not a mandate. And there is a reason, like when you look at schools in the past, people have had lice checks, MS checks. We don't do those things anymore. Health and education do not go hand in hand. I am responsible for my family's health. You are not. The same goes for politics. I'll just put that one out there. Schools should also not be sending out political ideas to their children either. So politics, health, education, separate venues. So that's all I'm gonna kind of say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would care to be recognized? Thank you.
Basically, some of the things she said is what I was going to say.
I'm sorry. Can I ask for your name and
Scott Wilmarth,
from Prescott?
in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the things that she said is what I planned on saying. And then also, the vaccine is not, again, something that, what you do with your child is up to you, but what I do with mine is up to me. And we just don't know. It's still experimental. We just don't know enough yet, okay? So that I just want to put that out there. And then the in-town busing. I see that's on the agenda for tonight. To consider, So it's still just under consideration?
It's to act on.
Okay.
So in the business section, it's for action.
Okay. So I guess maybe my thoughts on this aren't relevant if there's already a
Well,
plan.
there's thoughts. Yeah, go ahead and say your thoughts because it does play.
Okay. I guess the way it, obviously it's an inconvenience thing, right? But if it was if it was gonna protect children, of course it's worth an inconvenience to protect children. But I don't understand how it could protect children when a child maybe not having a safe way home because of parents having to do X, Y, or Z, or get hung up in traffic or whatever. I don't see how a kid getting from school to home is less of a threat than COVID-19 to our children. And if anybody could show me data that supports that, it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I feel like COVID is less of a threat than not having busing for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else care to be recognized?
Ken Anderson, Prescott, Wisconsin. I'm just wondering when exactly you guys voted to go into a closed session in the open session as required by state statute.
Ken, we're not going to go there. We're not going to get it into a discussion. You can state your comments, but we're not
Okay.
going to have a debate.
All right, so state statute 19.85. Any meeting of a governmental body upon motion duly made and carried by the convened in closed session under one or more of the exemptions provided in this section, the motion shall be carried by a majority vote in such a matter. That vote of each member is ascertained and recorded in the minutes. No motion convened in closed session may be adopted unless the chief presiding officer announces to those present at the meeting at which such a motion is made the nature of the business to be considered at such closed session and the specific exemption or exemptions under the subsequent section by which such closed session is claimed to be authorized. Such announcement shall become part of the record of the meeting. No business may be taken up at any closed session except for that which relates to matters contained in the chief presiding officer's announcement of the closed session. A closed session may be held for any of the following purposes. We've gone over that, but we also, in the same statute, under D, I believe it is, that no closed session meeting can be convened without vote in an open session. So I would just like to state that I believe you're going into closed sessions before an open session is not following state law. Thank you.
So, Ken, thank you for pointing that out. I am going to call you out on that, though. Okay? So, we are well aware of the state statutes, and I don't appreciate when you come up here and make a comment like that we're not following state statutes. So, please understand that. All right? We're well aware of state statutes and we follow them. Is there any other comments? Name?
Hi. I have to take my glasses off.
Yeah, can you
Sorry.
state your name and
Taslin Magnuson, from Prescott
thank you.
Town.
Yep, Prescott.
I'm from Prescott. I'm the mother of a 12th grader and an incoming 10th grader. Thank you for the opportunity to share tonight. I'm here to talk about COVID-19 and the upcoming school year. First, I want to say that I believe the school administration has made the best possible decisions for our children, teachers, and staff. And I'm grateful the board has supported the work of the professionals. Today I'm here to express my hope that the board and school administration will continue to make decisions about COVID-19 precautions using evidence-based science and look to recommendations from public health officials such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, World Health Organization, and the Centers for Disease Control. I believe their data-driven recommendations and informed experience are our best guide through this pandemic. I don't like to do this. As a parent, it is my job to advocate for the rights of my children to feel safe at their school. That happens when there are consistent and clear decisions from leadership that use evidence-based science to guide decisions about COVID-19 plans. This afternoon, I read a bunch of stuff from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC. These are complicated and multi-layered issues. What the school administration and school board have in front of them again this year is really hard. My family and other families are depending on you to make consistent decisions based on the best possible information from experts and evidence, scientific evidence. Your transparent leadership, rooted in evidence-based science and public health, together with the school administration, is the best possible way to get us through this pandemic. I think there is no harder job right now, but your work protects my children's right to a safe and healthy school environment. Your decision allows teachers and school staff to focus on what matters: education and the social emotional welfare of themselves and their students. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Well, yep.
I'm Allison Eniga. I totally agree that we need to make evidence-based decisions. I totally agree on that. The CDC just came out with the COVID tests. They're pulling them in December, okay? Are you guys gonna be using the COVID tests to quarantine our kids when we know they're not effective? We know they're not effective because there was no influenza. The CDC states that they can't tell the difference now between influenza, COVID, and such things like that. I'm just curious, are we gonna be using those tests to quarantine our kids? And if we're using evidence-based data, then you need to look around, because there's other scientists and there's thousands of doctors, epidemiologists, and such that are saying that we need to slow down on this vaccine. And when we get a letter that is pushing the vaccine, I think it would be helpful to have more sides of the story. I know no one's forcing anybody at this point, but there was a response back to somebody that said, I can't verbatim, Dr. Spacuzza, you probably know it, but one part in it that triggered me was when it said sans vaccination, social distance, and masking. To me, that sounds like segregation and discrimination against children that aren't being vaccinated. Maybe a better choice of words, you know, and I'm not speaking for any of these people, but there's a lot of people here that are concerned. We don't want our kids masked ever again. There's plenty of evidence out there that says masking does not help. Virus particles are much too small. They go right through masks. They're more detrimental to kids, their well-being. So if we're looking at evidence, can we look a little bit deeper? Or maybe we could even have a discussion where we work together on these matters so we can all come together for the benefit of our kids. I would never, ever tell any of you guys how to raise your kids or what to do with your kids. And I honestly, you guys don't stay up when my kids are sick in the middle of the night. You don't know what's best for my kids, as I don't know what's best for you. So mandating, when it comes to health decisions, I just stay away from it. You gotta stay away from it when it comes to masking and vaccinations. That's all I gotta say, but thank you.
Anybody else care to be recognized? All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 6, good news from around the district. Dr. Spaguzza.
So obviously behind me are some of the great things that have happened at the end of the school year, celebrating some of our state championship runs with the girls basketball team. We had an incredible summer program. As you can see, we are delighted to see everybody's faces. It's good to be up here without a face covering underneath the theatrical lights that we usually don't like to be under. And tonight, later on, we'll give an update with regards to COVID and some of the information that you've asked for and some input. The board will be making its decision on a return to learn and our COVID protocols on August 18th. So between now and the information we provide, we hope to be able to keep you updated as things continue to evolve. You've mentioned about the correspondence out to families. My pledge has been to make sure that over the next, we started last week, which was 6 weeks before we returned to learn. We will be having kind of a celebration or Olympic ceremonies on August 30th and 31st. And right after I sent out the email, CDC comes out with their new guidance, right? And so you'll learn a little bit about what we're looking at and some of the discussions that we've had since July 20th. This is the number of emails and pamphlets I've received with regards to guidance from DHS, the Educational Department of Education, and we're still working on our own plans as an administrative team. We will be working internally, and I'll go through all of that at the information discussion per our agenda. I did want to give everybody an update with regards to a couple things that have happened with regards to finance and funding. My hope, as we kind of continue to correspond over the next 30 days and head into the new academic year is we get to engage in a solution. And here's the challenge. Oh, I guess it's not playing. Thank you. Makes a lot more sense if you can see what I'm talking about. So, this morning, there's an author and an administrator named Jimmy Casas, and it's called Culturize. And we've talked a lot about, since I've been here, about trying to build and continuous improvement system within our organization, not to just be a good school, but a system of excellent schools, to be able to look at the academic learning and the engagement of our community. And I hope that over the next few months, as we continue to engage, it is our objective over the last 2 academic school years, we have had disruptive educational programming that has impacted our students cognitively, academically, social-emotionally, and mental health. It has also significantly affected our staff. Our staff who have endured K-5 were able to show up every single day and keep our schools open K-5. And that was in the upper echelon of our state, as well as within the continental United States. We were more challenged at 6 through 12. Some of it is environmental arrangements. It is very difficult based on the current format of our middle school facility, based on smaller classes and also a building that is over capacity. Capacity has been identified twice in a study in 2016 and repeated by an independent group in 2019, that it's built for 300 students. We've averaged over 320 to 350. We do not have central air, and we don't have filtration units. Those become huge challenges just in hot days, humid days, and then add COVID. And so those are some of the things that we ran into. I'm hoping that we can have positive intent as we come back in a very good scenario with regards to we are currently under no external mandate with regards to having to wear masks. Currently, Wisconsin and our neighbor Minnesota are in the yellow range for current outbreaks with regards to COVID. I hope as we continue to look at our students as they come back, the goodness that they offer in every single grade, and we will meet where they are, both academically, cognitively, and social emotionally. We have added teachers for interventions at all 4 of our buildings. We have added some additional behavior deans and have split our activities director, who will now have sole discretion over our 6 through 12 programming. We continue to want to work with our families to make sure that we are delivering the instructional programs that you want, that we're expanding those to fit the needs of our community, and to be able to refine those as we see moving forward. To my administrative team, they have, and I have worked over this summer, and they get annual reviews and one-on-one. Their reflections were very sombering. To a person individually, they talked about the stress, the trauma, and the sleepless nights that they have faced. They've talked about what their concerns and fears were, as well as what they look forward to coming forward. We are at the cusp, what I think can truly be the golden years for Prescott Public Schools. We have 4 excellent facilities. We have a strong student body. We have staff who are positive, and we have a board that has invested in them through professional development and also updates with regards to their salaries. They have a guiding change document to make sure that our salaries reach the 75th percentile among our middle border districts. They have made adjustments that have not been able to be made since 2015 for our hourly employees, and I applaud their efforts, and I applaud the administrative team to make sure that we stayed on budget and on target over these last few years. So I ask that we kind of imagine a community that we choose every day, that we build and partner both as parents, families, and the larger community, as well as with our admin and our staff out to our community. We have so many things to be grateful for. You saw some of the pictures of the summer programming that was in place, and I am very excited about this school year. But what you see is important for everybody to see, is that we do have to also have solutions. And I can tell you, I do not have all the solutions. What I can share is that I am frustrated, as you could be or likely are at times, because there are a lot of differences that you'll see this year that will give us as an administrative team and a school board more freedom and flexibility to make local decisions. But I can share with you that if you look at this map that was released yesterday by CDC, these are the infection rates across the country. We're blessed right now that in Wisconsin, we do not have a high infection rate. But as a school board and as a superintendent, I do have to at least plan for the possibility that we will become yellow, orange, or red. And so over the next 30 days, I will continue to share out the information that we are still trying to put in place. And by the end of this meeting, you'll know what we are currently framing up. And I hope that you'll stay to be able to look at that. I also wanted to shift into funding. The biennial funding did just come through. The Joint Finance Committee did not do, local schools in Prescott in particular did not do well. The funding for public schools, and this is important for everybody to understand, is yesterday, Governor Evers did call a special session to reallocate $550 million out to public education that was earlier vetoed from going into a rainy day fund. The state of Wisconsin has a surplus of $4.4 billion in order to run its allocations. It taxes the citizens. That money, they are not a bank. Their job is either to invest in its communities, its people, its infrastructure, or give it back. I applaud the legislature for giving tax and homeowners relief with regards to property tax relief. If you live in our district, you know we have high taxes. That's an incredible gift. What did not happen is that you will see placards that are describing that the state is giving more dollars to public education. It's not true. And yes, it is true. How can two things be true at the same time? Because we are under the revenue cap limit. Prescott Public Schools cannot receive any additional money unless the legislature changes the revenue cap, the total amount of revenue that we receive. What they did, and we applaud them, is that they decreased local taxes for based on property tax. But if the revenue limit doesn't go up, and we are algebraically funded by local taxes and state dollars, if one goes down, the other one goes up, but the amount of money going into our classrooms did not change. And that is after the 2 years of what administrators and what your teachers and staff have done for our community, I think is a travesty. And I think that Warren Petrick, who shares out information, and I've asked him, I don't mind if he wants to talk about that more dollars are coming in from the state, as long as he is honest and shares that the revenue cap did not change. And that has not been discussed. I will, at the end, be able to give you an update about our COVID plan. And at this time, we're going to move into our regular business.
So, okay. All right. Thank you, Rick. One point here I did want to make. In closed session, we also voted to move an item out of consent agenda already for the vaping lawsuit. So that'll come after consent. So we are on school business. The first item is consent agenda. On the consent, we have the board minutes, the board checks, personnel retirements, resignation, employment, changes of non-licensed staff, and continued business office support services through Baird. That is in the consent agenda. Is there anything else that the board would consider to remove?
Not for me.
I will adopt the consent agenda. Are there any objections? All right, the consent agenda is adopted. We're going to move into the next item, which is now the vaping lawsuit. So we'll call it B.
Yep. And get you back. All right. So we have an opportunity to participate in a national lawsuit with regards to vaping litigation. And it is a mass action, similar to a class action with some variation. The difference is that the final financial benefit to how it's played out to our clients. We have been contacted. There are over 55 districts in the state of Wisconsin. As you know, students under 18, and based on board policy, tobacco and illicit drugs are not allowed on campus, and yet we do have instances of where students are vaping. It continues to be a health risk for many of our students. We continue to work with our counselors and secondary families with regards to understanding the impact that vaping has. We have also had to work on additional state training with regards to training our staff how to detect, and also with regards to disciplinary actions and educational actions on behalf of our district. At this time, we have been asked if we would like to participate in this mass action lawsuit. There is no additional cost to the district, but it does have the ability to help recoup some of the additional costs that we've had to spend based on our educational programs during our health classes, as well as some of the additional professional development that is required by our state for our teachers. So at this time, I wanted to see if you had any specific additional questions about that, or if I have permission to submit our district forward with regards to this mass action lawsuit.
Tanya, any questions on this one?
Not really questions. I'm all for it. In the past, there has been tobacco lawsuits similar, and school districts have been funded for curriculum and preventative programs and stuff like that. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and those are dollars, if awarded, that would go back into servicing our students. So it makes sense to me.
Pat?
No questions other than, right, there's no cost to us to participate. Is there a distraction from regular business by administration to participate though?
Yeah, good question. Very minor. It's at no time would we have to, during the litigation, have to be part of any depositions, participation in it. All we have to do is kind of fill out some of the things that Tanya mentioned about the educational classes, professional development, and submit for it. It'll be kind of then divvied up among the different districts if an award is given. Obviously, the lawyers take a cut, and I think it depends on how quickly it is resolved. Based on, let's just say $100 million is given, they'll get a percentage of that. So there's no additional cost to the district, but it could help reimburse us for some of our previous costs.
Thank you.
Do we have a timeline? When do we have to sign on and?
Yes, by the end of this month.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion needs to be for, what's the motion here?
To give us permission to join the mass action lawsuit.
Okay. So if anybody would like to make the motion.
I move to join the mass action lawsuit, or vaping lawsuit
Against Jewel.
against Jewel.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Go to item B, retirement, resignation, and employment of licensed staff.
Yep. At this time, we do have one resignation. That is with regards to high school counselor that has rescinded her initial offer, and that is Emily Spofford.
Any questions, comments, board?
No.
Okay, we'll take these one at a time. Anybody want to make a motion here?
I move to approve the acceptance of the rescinded offer by Emily Spofford for the position of high school counselor.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Employment?
Yes, we have 3 individuals, been able to meet some of them, and I'm very happy to announce that we have 3 teachers that are anxious to join our passionate staff, and that is Dana Wells for a position of a 4th grade teacher at the intermediate school. And I'll go through all 3, and then you can take motions on each. Arena, and I apologize, I know that Michael, is it Sabraka? Sabrasha. And she would be a 4th grade teacher, so we'll have 2 join in the intermediate staff. And then Lance Toykheim, who would be a 6th grade social studies teacher at our middle school.
Any questions, board?
I was just curious about process a little bit, Rick. I know normally we have kind of a committee or some teacher involvement and stuff like that, and with it being summer and ending COVID, how did that process
Yeah,
look this time?
Michael had a really nice setup, and I'll have him kind of describe, because two of the teachers are from his school.
Yeah, so the process at the intermediate school, it was towards the end of May when we opened up the position. After a week and a half, we closed taking applications because we had 28 applications for that 4th grade position. From there, myself and the PLC leader, Sarah Score, independently went through the 28 applications, and we scored them on a 1 to 5 scale. And then we were able to make some comments. From that narrows down to, I took anyone that we had both scored 5s or averaged a 4 between the two of us, which was 12. I then did phone conversations with all 12 of them, and did a 3 or 4 questions screening. From there, we then narrowed it down to 7 that we brought in and interviewed, and that was with a full team, including a special education, an interventionist, and then a classroom teacher as well, and myself. From that process, after each candidate, we talk about strengths, weaknesses, and then fit in terms of our culture, but then also in terms of getting us to be the best at getting better. We don't rank any of them. We just go through that. And then at the very end, I asked the teachers in the room to put them into 3 piles, high, medium, and low. We came up with the exact same low, the exact same medium, and the exact same high. And the two tonight were the 2 that we had in our high. Had we had not been so clear and cut, then we were going to have round 2, and it was when summer school was going on. We would have had them teach some of our summer school students, just so we could see them and interact with children. But because the team felt so strongly about the 2, and those were the 2 names I got put forward.
Great, thank you.
And we do a very similar at the middle school. Our teachers are involved, as well as our middle school principal.
All right, so we can rip through these one at a time. Somebody wants to make the motions?
I'll do the first one. I move to approve the hiring of Dana Wells for the position of 4th grade teacher.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries. Next.
Try this one. I move to approve the hiring of Ariana Sabrica for the position of 4th grade teacher.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that one carries. And then last.
I move to approve the hiring of Lance Tolcom for the position of 6th grade social studies teacher.
Go
Second.
ahead.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. We miss you, Steve Sizemore, for not making those motions for us. So, all right, we're on item C, girls golf team.
We're going
overnight
to
trip.
ask the dynamic duo. I have Matt Smith. Matt, this is your last meeting with us. We appreciate you being here. And Andrew, why don't you come down too, because you'll be doing the second one right after with Matt.
And I appreciate everyone being here tonight to see me present. Thank you. This is Andrew Caudill, our new activities director. He'll get to present a little bit more later on the code revisions and move forward from there. Coach Soleil wanted to be here tonight. He got caught up actually in a golf tournament, but he did put together a proposal for an overnight trip, which needs to come to the board for approval to have. So basically, it's for the girls golf team. It would be for August 13th through August 16th. I'm looking to take 10 golfers. We'll have 2 to 3 chaperones, and they're going to go stay at the Wilderness Resort in the Wisconsin Dells area there. And the rationale for this trip is obviously they're the reigning state champs. They have the entire roster coming back from last year. There were 0 seniors this past fall. They wanted to do this trip for a while. Last year, unfortunately, with COVID, they were unable to. And so they've had this on their radar now for a while. It's in terms of competition, being the reigning state champs, they're looking for a chance to get out, golf on some extravagant courses, and play against some teams that are at a very high caliber right now. So they'd go down there, they'd leave Friday morning, the 13th, they would golf in the Reedsburg Invitational Friday afternoon. Then they would take Saturday and Sunday to kind of do some team bonding, some opportunities there as a team in the Dells, and then they would golf on Monday at Toma on the 16th and then return that evening. Basically, in terms of funding, they've been fundraising for opportunities like this. It would be through their booster club that they would fund it. We would use 2 school vans to transport them down there, driven by coaches. In terms of, like I said, the funding that would come from them for this trip here. So it would be 0 cost in terms of the district footing the bill for that. I feel it's a tremendous opportunity. I'm all for it. A few different avenues for that. The competition and the venues they get to golf at is, the type of thing that they need to do to be postseason ready. So I think from that vantage point there, it makes sense. And then the team bonding aspect, anything you can do like this, the cool opportunity for the kids, that I'm all for with that. So I guess any questions that pop up?
Vicki, any questions from that?
So they've got 2 tournaments that they're playing, or 2 invitational?
They'll be playing at 2 invitationals,
Okay.
yep, Friday and Monday.
Okay.
Tanya?
Nope, so it sounds like it's cost neutral for us. They've done some fundraising and has some booster clubs. And this doesn't fall with any kind of requirements with contact with coaches or anything out of season or anything
Nope,
like that.
it's considered their season. Yep,
Perfect.
it's in their regular season.
And then chaperone-wise, we have, I know the coaches are males and we have 1 female. I just want to make sure we have a male and female supervisor.
Well, yeah, we'll make sure that we cover those bases in terms of with the hotel, there needs to be a room
Perfect.
check or whatnot, yeah.
Perfect, and I'm all for it. We do this kind of stuff for a lot of different sports for various reasons. I think it's a great opportunity, so
Yep.
great.
And that's what Coach Slay and I talked about, him and Darren coaching the South Washington District for the Boys Avenue. They talked about these opportunities also, and they wanted to bring it to Prescott and give our team that chance also.
That's great.
There'd be no loss of school time either. It's
Yeah.
before the school year starting, so another thing to point out.
Pat?
No questions.
Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity. Thanks, Matt. We'll take a motion.
I move to approve the Prescott girls golf team trip taking place on August 13th through August 16th, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That one carries. And we'll move to item D, consider revisions of the Prescott School District Co-Curricular Activity Code.
I'll
Second
turn it
reading.
over to Andrew here.
And Matt, stay nearby, but Andrew, since this is your first opportunity, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick introduction, a little bio, and also share a little bit about where you used to sit versus where you now are standing.
Sure. Thank you all very much, and I first want to thank Matt for all the help that he's given me over the last few weeks. So my name's Andrew Caudill. I'm a new activities director. I'm from Union Grove, Wisconsin. Been away from the state for a while. I come from the University of Nevada. I spent the last 7 years there, roughly 10 years at the collegiate level. And when I was out there, I spent the last 2.5 years as an elected school board member. So I absolutely know what it is like to be in your seats. I'm okay with being on this side, but definitely have respect for you all in your position. So I'll go ahead and move into the code revisions. There's really two main sections. The first section centers around the academics. This slide just summarizes what was already discussed.
Okay.
So for the academic portion, clarified the language around the terms, making it more universal since the high school moved to trimester. Language was also clarified to represent what was in practice, that final grades are reviewed 1 term at a time for going into the next term. This language was cleaned up to be more clear on what the requirements were if students weren't passing courses coming out of a term going into the next term. And like I said, that is the same whether it's trimesters for the high school or quarters at the middle school level. So you can go to the next slide. We added language to line up with the WIAA. The WIAA does require students to sit if they have 2 or more incomplete grades. And then once those incomplete grades get handled, they are able to return per school policy, and if they do turn into failing grades, then it falls under the other provisions of this code. We added some midterm grade checks to ensure that our students are completing their courses satisfactorily throughout the term, both the middle school and the high school level. Those dates will be predetermined by principals when they do their midterm grade checks school-wide. And then students, if they are not passing their courses, will be pulled for 1 week at a time. Then we'll keep grade checking them every week to ensure they're passing their courses, and once they are, they'll be allowed to return. This was done to ensure that we aren't getting to the end of the term and have a surprise that students weren't completing their courses, and then the coaches in the next season would be surprised by not having students available to them. The next section, I know you all spent a lot of time talking about the appeal procedure. This was the current version before the revision. And what we are proposing is a cleaned up process that defines who is on the committee, also a timeline that's much faster. So the committee will be made up of 3 faculty members, and those faculty members will be appointed by either the high school principal or middle school principal, opposite of whichever school the student is attending. Therefore, the middle school principal has to do any investigation in partnership with myself. He's not involved in setting up the committee, vice versa with the high school. The faculty members that are chosen, we put in language that ensures there is no conflict of interest. They cannot have the student in class. They cannot be a coach of the student. They cannot be the advisor of a student. That doesn't mean that it isn't determined by the administrator that faculty member may not be a good fit, but we wanted to ensure that the process is clean and who is serving on this committee is in line with what we would want to have in a final result, because we are recommending that the decision of the appeal committee be final. And then that would be it, and it would be over. So the timeline is much faster and cleaner, and hopefully in line with what you all were discussing at your last meeting. So Matt and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Pat, do you have any questions?
The only one is, and I'm not opposed to it, it just is the midterm, grade check. Great idea. I guess I would be a little bit concerned, about how that gets practiced and how formal it is, and are we worried about any, is it formal enough? Hey, it's midterm, good time to check in on students. You're having a failing grade, now you got to sit a game, sit a contest. I guess I want to make sure that it's formal enough that there's not any gray area there.
Yeah, good question. It is formal. All students in the school will be given a midterm grade check at the same time. It's an infinite campus. The date's predetermined. Students and families will be covered in code meetings so they know. And if they happen to be involved in athletics and activities, then the code will be applied. It will not be something where we just wake up one day and say, let's check. Now, coaches do have the ability to set their own team expectations that they would have to go over with the team in advance, and also with myself. And if they would like to do something like that, that's fine, but that's not something that we're going to run. So it is predetermined, so it isn't random. It'll be clear. All teachers post those grades, and it is something that we can review, and the families can also review in the Infinite Campus.
Thank you.
Tanya?
Just to piggyback off that, I actually like that the midterm was picked because grades are typically due at that time. Teachers update the book, so it's not like you just caught it on a day where a teacher hasn't put in a grade for a week or something like that. So I like that it's kind of standardized and that everybody knows that the expectation is we're kind of caught up at that midterm when it comes to grades and stuff. So I think that's actually really good. And then I like that you cleaned up the time frame. I know we talked about this last time, but the appeal process, the time frame cleanup was to help the athlete as well, right? Because there was, I can't remember how many days it was before. Was it 7 or 10 days or something like that?
The total process, if the maximum number of days was used, could be up to, I think, 25 days in the old way.
And so the sooner we can kind of address whatever needs to be addressed and have kids get back to what they need to be doing, and teams have their players back and all that kind of stuff, I think the better for everybody involved. So I appreciate that part as well. So no questions, though.
Vicky?
We had originally kind of talked about one of the options with a bunch of other schools where they had a board member on there, and we're deciding just to cut that out.
Looking at it, with the board member, it does give it another level to have a board member there. Though the time frame to try to find a night that meets for that works for the committee, and then a board member to be there and then not have a conflict of interest, we decided that moving forward with staff within the school, we're able to do a fair process in a timely manner moving forward with that. And I don't want to say have to burden the board with trying to find a night to be there and do those things. Even though it is important, we feel the people that we have are important enough that we're able to do that.
I had a feeling I was going to be really, really busy.
And really that was part of like a third appeal process too, which we cut. That was one that was cut out too, was just the first appeal is kind of that final.
It tightens up that timeline.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, the teachers and administrators know best what needs to happen. Coaches do too, so it's best, I think, have that in your guys' hands.
Okay, so yeah, I did. I just want to comment on this one. So the changes from the last time we read this reading, how many, the difference in the amount of people on the committee, right? Because was that higher as well? Was that, I thought we were talking committee of 5, and I could be wrong. I'm trying. I don't have a.
It was open. There was no set real number.
Okay.
We went with 6. It came together nice. 3 now. The biggest thing is being able to do things in a timely manner.
Right.
I think that's out of respect for the athlete, the family, for everyone involved. It tightens up everything, and with doing that, you almost have to cut down the amount of people involved just to make sure schedules line. So that was the rationale.
Okay, and I'm on board with it. The one concern I would share, and I don't know how we're going to solve this, but having a board member in the hearing or having the appeal process go to the board, we at least got to talk policy, and that's kind of what spawned this in the first place. And I'm wondering, is there going to be something in place where the board will be aware of
reporting process?
The reporting process to make sure that we're following the code. If there's changes that need to be made, how does the board get awareness of that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what I have in place is a shared governance process where we'll have stakeholders that take part in our decisions, and reviewing the code will be a part of that process, and that's something that the board can either initiate or ultimately will have to approve in the end. Because I know from talking with Matt, this came up because of a previous appeal. I can always deliver updates to the board on if we have appeals. There could be written reports on there was appeal, what happened in that appeal. If the concern is things are happening in the schools and the board is unaware of the process and what's happening in the appeals, we can definitely make sure there's an update to the board on the result of an appeal if one is filed, if that is the concern.
Can that be part of something like whether it's per trimester, we just have kind of it's part of our meeting or update, or whether it's at the end of every year? I'm not sure. Maybe this first time it's a little bit more often just to make sure the process is working. But then it kind of seems like it's a planned and purposeful kind of update that we're waiting on.
Yeah, I would agree. It very, very rarely happens that something like this comes to the board level, but when it does, I mean, it does tend to spawn discussion about, is our policy airtight? Can we interpret the policy right? So those are the concerns I guess I would have. So I would absolutely be for at least getting some type of periodic review, and you guys can figure out when and where and what that looks like. But that's something I think we should continue to look at. So thanks, and nice to meet you. Only 2.5 years on the school board?
I looked
I didn't know they had
a lot
2.5 year
younger
terms.
2.5 years ago.
All right, thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Just before you vote, though, could you just click off, because this is an update of the policy, how do we communicate this out to our coaches, athletes? Because fall season's just around the corner. And what do you have in place so that the athletes and families are informed?
Yeah, so we pushed our football code meeting to Monday. That was the only code meeting that was originally scheduled before this board meeting. So this new code, once it's voted on, whatever the result is, that is what's sent to families. Infinite Campus will be utilized for all the forms now for registration. That was pushed to being launched till tomorrow. So when families and students sign the code pledge, they will be getting the updated code that's approved tonight and then reviewed with the families and students in the code meeting, and also will be sent to head coaches to ensure they're well briefed in the language so they can ensure that they are reinforcing it and understand what occurs in the event's not followed.
And coaches had some input on this as well.
Yeah, coaches had a lot of input. Frankly, coaches are where the idea of the midterm check came from. High school level, they felt the seasons lined up with the trimesters nicely so that the next season coach would end up being surprised by grades of the previous trimester. And so coaches definitely played a big part in this development.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll need a motion.
I'll move to accept the revisions of the Prescott School District Co-Curricular Activity Code for the 2021-2022 school year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thanks, guys.
And just before, Matt, you step away, the school board and I went in among the admin team. We just wanted to give you a little memento of Prescott. We know that you're a snappy dresser. So before you leave, you might want to open this in front of everybody and share out how this fits with your outfit. Yeah. We got a television audience.
Turn around for the camera, too.
I'll ask Mr. Flaherty to do a close-up. Matt's the only guy I know that can still pull off wearing white shoes. There you go.
That's really slick.
Always thinking, buddy. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Matt. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item E, annual update to the board on curriculum standards.
Good evening, board members again. Every year, the state of Wisconsin statute requires that we publicly announce what standards we'll be following for the following areas: reading, writing, math, science, history, geography, and personal finance. And personal finance literacy was added, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago to the list. We do not need to announce or have a motion on any of our other standards. However, all of our standards are listed at our teaching and learning on our website. So all of our standards, K-12, that we use in all of our different curricular areas are there. For this year, again, a couple semi-new ones, Next Generation Science Standards, that was several years ago. We went to that. The state of Wisconsin did create their own, but it was made from the backbone of the national Next Generation Science Standards, and their advice were, if your school and district had already moved to those new standards, that you would not adopt Wisconsin, because it basically was just rearranged due to state statute. The way that the state has to have the standards aligned or arranged is a little bit different, but otherwise the substance of those standards are exactly the same. A couple years ago, we did adopt the C3 standards, or we were looking at that framework, and again, that was a national one. The state of Wisconsin did come out with their own version, which then did put a local things into those standards, and those were the standards we adopted a few years ago. The only big change, and it's really not a big change, the only change is the state standards for the English language arts. They were revised in May of 2020. Our PLCs have looked at them. Really, what they did is they took some of those standards and they put them together, cleaned up some of the wordiness. They tried to make them more inclusive. So when we talk about reading, we are also including if a student needs to have a book read to them via a computer, that is considered reading. Writing, if a kid is dictating on a computer voice to text, that technically is writing. Typing is writing. So it's just trying to get that more inclusive language and definitions into the standards, so that way everyone can access those standards. So these are the standards that we have in place, and every year, again, we do this, the board adopts them, and again, they are curated on our website under the teaching and learning.
Vicki, any questions?
No.
Pat?
No questions.
Tanya?
No questions.
Looks good, Michael. Thank you.
I move to accept the student academic standards that shall be in effect for the 2021-2022 school year, as said list has been presented on the Prescott School District website annual notice page with a date of July 28th, 2021 for this meeting, with said academic standards representing the board adopted standards that are required under section 118.31Ga of the state statutes, as well as the board approved standards in the additional specified academic content areas.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. And again, we miss Steve Sizemore on that one.
We
So
got it covered.
you did a good job, but not quite as good as Steve does. Item F is consider approval for fall coaches.
Well, welcome back.
I'm back. So this is our current list. Fall coaches, all head coaches are returning. We have some new faces and the assistants. Hope to be back in August with a couple last hires. We have a middle school opening volleyball and middle school opening for cross country. Do you have any questions about the list? But we're excited for our teams this year.
Pat, any questions on these?
No, I am gonna abstain from the vote.
Okay. Tanya?
No questions.
Steve? Vicki?
Thanks, Mike. I usually don't sit here, but no, I don't have any questions.
Okay, and just to clarify, with the abstaining vote, we need a 3-vote pass. Just to be clear on that, so for anybody in the audience that's wondering. All right, so we will entertain a motion here.
I move to approve the fall 2021 coaches as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries, and Pat has abstained.
Thank you, gentlemen. Congratulations to our coaches for the fall year.
So item G is considering town busing proposal.
Going to have Tim Runquist come forward. I'm going to pull up kind of a map and give an introduction. I want to just thank Tim for all the work that he's been doing. The amount of work last year, we are very hopeful that we can get back into providing additional pickup for students within town. As some of the community may or may not be aware, and so I just wanted to be clear, by state statute, we are required to provide busing for students that live beyond a mile, as well as some hazardous zones. So we have a hazardous zone model that's been sent to DPI. Anytime there's students walking across a major highway, those things remained, and those routes remained in process last year, and they'll continue to occur this year. In Tim's proposal, I just wanted to kind of share, we are proposing to the board, based on some things that Tim had to adjust based on enrollment and where students live. We have many routes that go out to the country, and we had bus routes that were becoming very condensed and had the longest amount of time spent in the bus. Due to COVID, we did have to decrease the amount of ridership, and we also took one of our fleets, buses, and added it out into the country. That shortened our routes, which means students were on the buses for a shorter period of time, which many families appreciated. They weren't overcrowded. The difficulty is we have a fixed number of buses. And so as he has started to look in the spring and bringing back in-town options, it is our proposal that we would continue with the number of buses going out to the country to keep one, the routes to a shorter amount of time, and to make sure that we have balanced loads. In coming back into town, Tim's going to walk you through kind of the stops, and they're designated by the green dots. In addition, any of our school buildings, including the parochial school St. Joseph's, would be a pickup spot for students to get on a bus and be transported to any one of our other schools. So Tim, do you want to kind of walk through how you looked at the buses coming in the morning and going out, and why you selected these locations?
Okay, putting the stops out there basically was to have them separated so the students would kind of have to walk an equal distance. Nobody would have to walk more than 4 blocks, which we all know that our blocks are different lengths in town here. In many different areas, one block is longer than another spot. I also put these pickup and drop-off locations in areas where there's a lot of apartments, such as Monroe Street, down on Helen and Monroe, in Lawrence area. There's 10 apartments besides the residential housing in that area. Shane Park Circle and Glen Ridge Drive, there is 16 apartments up there and residential housing. Pine Street and Canton pickup, that is near the trailer court. We have 93 trailer in that park there. The Pearl and Hilton stop is down toward Philanders. There's 5 apartments down there and residential housing. The Heart, Hands, and Mind and New Adventure, they are a part of our school district. We do have classes there, but we also do pick up and drop off students at them locations. Approximately 15 to 20 kids each morning, and 20 to 30 kids go home to them, go back to them daycares there. So just trying to get things evenly spaced out from the far corners, down from the high school, Jewel Street, and Dexter, Walnut and Linden, they're just spread out. So if kids have to walk, it shouldn't be more than that 4 normal block distance. So that's kind of how I try to space them out. Besides, as Dr. Spacuzza stated, each school would be a hub. So if students wanted to walk to the intermediate school, Malone Elementary, middle school, they probably should not have to walk more than 4 blocks to be able to get a ride on a bus there, from the middle school to the high school to intermediate school and so on. So, yeah, any questions on that?
Somebody's calling in just to see what the route's going to be and pickup time. Just wanted to let you know that one of the urgencies that we have is obviously families are curious about what time is their bus going to be picking up their child and what time are they dropping off. And we currently have a survey going out. Tim is under the gun that by the beginning of August, we start having orientation nights, we start communicating out to families. So we're hoping that through the survey, he needs to be able to load balance. So if we have a country bus coming in and there's 30 kids by an apartment building and only 5 seats open, that's going to be a very ugly first couple of weeks of school. So that survey was set up so that we could start to do that, and we start to communicate out. So Tim, you also had comments on there, and I just wanted to be with regards to, are these the final stops, and what is your recommendation as we move forward about trying to accommodate if there's a necessary accommodation to be made?
Not necessarily the final stop, because I believe the survey is still, we're still getting information through the rest of this week. I would like to have that final decision made by the end of the week, early next week, because then all this stuff has to be put into individual, or in an infinite campus for each individual student, so they can know what bus number, what time, so on and so forth. So that's kind of one of the urgencies for me, is to get this moving forward if we decide that we're going to add these stops to the bus routes.
And how big is your department? Okay, so this is Tim trying to communicate and get it all into the system. So we are hoping that as a board, you can, any questions that you have about how he specifically selected, some parameters that we would have with regards to getting this information out to families, or any comments that we've received, to be able to address those at this time.
Sure. Tanya, do you want to start?
Sure. Just so I'm understanding, this is a plan that's going to take one bus, basically, to kind of run this, or is it back to the 2?
This is 10 of our 11 buses. We have
Oh.
one bus that does the hazard area in town
Okay.
right now.
Yep.
And we have 10 other buses, but we don't, right now, we're short one driver.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if I can't get another driver, we've been advertising for a little more than 2 months.
Yep. I
had
see the signs up.
4 inquiries. At this time, nobody has decided to get their license. I might possibly get a sub driver, which would leave us one short. So I would have to consolidate some of my other bus routes and stuff just to get ready for the school year now. So we're kind of under a little pressure to get that going. If I don't have someone on board by the end of this week, I'm going to have to start that process next week. But buses coming in on Highway 10 will have their designated pickup spots, probably 2 per bus. Highway 35 would be the same, 29. And then when these buses leave at the end of the day, they will be heading out them same corridors. So I'm kind of putting them bus stops according to their travel
Gotcha.
area.
Gotcha. So it's kind of a combination of the out of
Yes.
town. Yep. Perfect. And then, you know, you mentioned the survey, and I just want to really encourage people to fill out that survey. I know it's important, and we've heard some response from the community already about busing, which was great because we asked for that last month. We wanted to know more about how people were feeling about this, and the survey is really, you know, when it comes to us managing where the bus stops are, that's not really our role, but making sure that the survey's filled out, that you're able to kind of manage and make sure. I just don't want there to be this little hidden pocket of kids and they're walking 5 or 6 blocks or something like that, and I trust that that's kind of your plan for next week, it sounds like, is to make sure these are in the right spots, and our kids are not walking more than, you know, 3 or 4 blocks at a time.
Yeah, the survey was very helpful for me
Yeah.
to look at how many students are going to get on these buses in town, or approximately. There could be a few more by the time we get to starting school and stuff, but it will help me so that we don't overload the bus at one certain area.
And then my other comment, and Rick, I'm happy that you brought this up here because it had to do with this, which is I know we're hiring. I know it's hard for us to find bus drivers. We did have a raise last year. I do think we are offering some kind of increase for special kind of routes and stuff for next year, which is great. But also something unique is providing the training for our bus drivers. Do you want to speak at all to that? Because without that extra person, that changes all of our bus routes.
Yeah, well, it'll change about half of our bus routes on the south side of town. Yeah, and I've always provided the training for the 27 years I've been here. I've trained all the new drivers that come in, except for probably 1 or 2 that came in already with a license. So we've always done that. We're just advertising it, and so people know that they
You don't have to have experience.
that we can get it. We also have a third-party tester here that works for us in the school district, so they don't have to leave here and go to another town to actually do their driving tests. And so if we could just find bodies that would be willing to drive, that would be key for us, and it would make things much easier. But at this point, like I say, it's been over 2 months we've been advertising, and we've got nowhere.
Right, right. And then I just wanted to say say thank you for doing this. I know when we came here last month, we weren't sure what we were going to do about in-town busing, and we've done a pivot because we heard from the community, as well as I think it's something that we promised them a year ago that we would be looking at how to bring it back. So I appreciate you probably spending the last month really looking at this and how it's going to work, and I know that's a lot of time. And you know, you didn't have your old routes last year to fall back on and just change a little bit. You had to look a couple years back, which changes where kids are going and stuff. So thank you for all that work.
Pat?
No, first of all, Tim, thanks for all the work, and I know that I mean, I feel bad about leaving these questions because you have, you know, rethink things. We've got the survey coming, which is going to come post wherever we decide tonight. How many proposed in-town stops in your plan right now? How many are added or removed between where we were at pre-COVID?
I have not counted that, but there's probably a third of the stops now than when we actually had bus routes in town. When we had routes in town, then they would be, one bus would do 2 routes in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So there's actually 6 routes in town, so it was much easier to cover, make the stops closer together. That's not feasible with this plan here. But I stated there shouldn't be anybody that would have to walk more than 4 blocks, and I believe that's kind of what was in the transportation proposal or in the web school website.
Sure.
Anything else, Pat?
You know, I guess the only comments I would have is I'm in agreement with you know, some of the people that spoke earlier. I think busing in town is vital to helping assure the safety of our students and provide parent you know, ease of mind. I don't like, you know, floor blocks isn't far, and I know we do better than a lot of districts, even in the surrounding areas. I don't take lightly the fact that young kids are walking 4 blocks sometimes in the dark and the snow. I mean, that's even though we're doing better than a lot, it's still something I'm concerned about when even the current plan has reduction in stops, you know, from where we were at, you know, pre-COVID. So I guess that's my only comment I want to make right now.
Can I piggyback? You brought up safety, and one of the things that we've heard, or at least I've heard a lot from the community, is the sidewalks and stuff. And I would just really advocate that that's a good conversation, not anything really within our control, but conversations with the city and stuff too. Because that is one of the barriers, especially once snow starts to come, and it's, you know, the roads get smaller as is. So yeah, I agree.
Vicky?
So there used to be 2 buses that did the routes in town, and you had to take one of those buses. We've switched it over to help out with the country routes, correct?
So before COVID,
Right.
we had 3 buses in town.
Okay.
Okay, we had, because of the hazard areas, we had to keep that one of the buses doing 2 routes. So 2 routes
okay.
remained in town here.
Okay.
Before that, we actually had 1 bus route that was overloaded. Basically, 50% of the people that are listed on a bus route ride. So there's some of them buses that are 71 passengers that were scheduled to have 110 kids on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we already know pretty much 50% of the kids are not using the bus.
Okay.
So that's the only way you can do that, is you have to kind of go with them statistic. But we got to the point where the bigger the developments out in the
Yep.
country, the more kids in the country, the buses were getting way overloaded
Mhm.
out there. So that's when the decision with COVID and trying
Yep.
to get fewer kids in every bus, we took the buses that were inside of the major highways and brought them out and developed more routes in the country with fewer kids on them.
Okay. And then that reduced the time for some of those kids on the bus because they were.
Yes.
What was the longest time, out of curiosity, that someone
Well,
was?
Right now, we've got the bus that went to Diamond Bluff still leaves about 6:30 in the morning
Okay.
and gets back to the bus garage at 7:55. So that didn't change much because
Right,
most of
the
it was
distance,
miles.
yeah.
But a lot of the mid-range bus routes probably took 15 minutes off of quite a few of the bus routes.
Okay. So
that-
ultimately, what would be really nice is fill the driver that we're short, and to really make this work as Prescott grows, we're looking at probably needing to increase a fleet and more drivers, just so we can accommodate that more vigorous in-town busing again alongside the country routes at this time.
Right now, if we wanted to go back to the way it was and keep our buses in the country, we would need 3 more bus routes and 3 more drivers.
Wow,
than we
okay.
have right now.
Okay, so realistically, we just financially and feasibly, we don't have the vehicles, we don't have the staff, we don't have anything right now. So that's something that down the road, we'd have to,
Staff would be my biggest problem.
yeah.
Fiscal could
Yeah.
be another issue. But right now, it's like.
You just can't get people.
We've had advertisement out
Yeah,
for a long time. It's just there's nobody interested in
Yeah.
driving, and I've sent personal letters to people that I would like to see possibly, and
Nothing
just not
back, huh?
getting any
Okay.
response.
well, it looks like something we're gonna have to work on not too far down the road to make this work again. All right, thanks for all of your time that you've put into this.
All right, Tim, thank you. Thanks for putting this together. I just want to, I guess, re-ask the same question. So we're talking from what we had pre-COVID to now, the budget that we have for transportation, did that change? Did that decrease at all? And to get to 3 buses, 3 more routes, 3 more drivers, how much? I mean, we're talking that would be an increase in what we're doing now. I'm wondering how close that was to pre-COVID dollars. And are we spending less on transportation, or is it the same pre-COVID?
Well,
And maybe that's your question. I don't know.
we should have spent less this past year because of field trips, less sporting events. So, but just regular bus routes probably did not change much because the same number of buses were out there. Actually cost probably a little more because we were out in the country. So regular transportation to and from school, if you're just going with that, probably costs a little more because we're putting more miles on fuel, and there's
Longer
drivers get paid
And
some by miles.
My point is really that we're operating on a budget that we had a year or 2 years ago, for this year. So our budget, I mean, with the exception of increases in driver salaries and whatnot, but our fleet is still the same amount of buses. We're trying to disperse the routes the best we can with what we have, but in order to really solve the problem of providing in-town busing for everybody, it would be an increase in our overall transportation budget by roughly 3 drivers and 3 buses, right? So I don't think that's off the table. I think the board is willing to look at that, and we're doing the best with what we have right now, right? So, I think, but that's something that I think the board would like to explore. And I know it's hard to get bus drivers; you can't even get 1, let alone 3. So that's problem number 1. But I think that's something that, as a board, we've heard a lot from the community. I value in-town busing, and it's very unique to the community, for Prescott compared to other communities. But simply put, right now we're trying to live with what we had as far as dollars and support in our fleet and what we have for drivers, and try to make it work the best we can. The plan that you have here is flexible, I assume. Like when the school year starts and you get into your routine and you realize, holy crap, we just realized we missed about 8 kids over here. We got to change some stops around. Is that going to be looked at?
It can be. I would like to be able to have this set up so that the information can be shared.
Yep.
So that the families that
you're trying to get ahead of it
to these
with
stops.
the survey.
I do. There's a few daycares that have contacted me that we're looking into licensed daycares and stuff. Maybe seeing how close we can get to a spot like that.
Right.
But that's so. Nothing is guaranteed yet, but most of these stops are spread out kind of evenly, and like I stated, with where there's a lot of housing and apartments and stuff, to try to accommodate that.
Yep.
Where I can get the most kids in a spot.
You're doing the
with
best
least
you can
amount
with
of
what you got.
distance. Yes.
And without an increase in a budget and being able to hire, this is where we're at, right?
Yeah, and I think for Tim's perspective, we load balance the fleet to take care of more riders out in the country. We still have the same number of drivers, same number of buses at this time. The challenge is that we're a couple weeks away, that Tim may have to actually reroute how many other routes if we don't get a hire?
Well, I'd have to eliminate one route, one bus route. So I'll have to divide that into different buses, and so
Shift them into the 10 other.
4 to 5 different bus routes that'll have to move kids around, go into IC and renumber their bus, their time, so on and so forth.
Right.
So.
So Tim and I have kind of bounced off. We've worked with a couple of both of the principals at the elementary. It would be nearly impossible at this time to go beyond this idea of being able to have identified bus stops for the beginning of the fall. One, because we're precariously close to not having a full set of drivers. And not only are we trying to recruit that driver, but also substitutes. Doesn't mean that we can't revisit and learn more as we build the budget, but our next item is the annual meeting, and then October. So we won't really have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed with our finances until late fall.
And I 100% support this. I think you're doing the best you can, is what I'm trying to say, with what we have, and trying to disperse the routes as best we can in town, provide some level of in-town busing. I know it's not ideal, but to get to ideal, it's going to cost more money. So that's something that we as a board would have to direct money to, or ask them to prioritize that. So, Tim, thanks a lot for all the work you've done on this. It's very, very helpful to know, and hopefully this was helpful for others as well. Let's make a motion.
I move to accept the Transportation Department's plan to provide in-town stops for the fall 2021, for the fall of 2021.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And we're on our last item for business, which is consider annual meeting.
Correct. There are two ways that the date is officially identified for the annual meeting. It can either be done at the annual meeting a year ahead, I believe it was 2 years ago, mainly because of timing so far out into September and October, understanding when the audits are done. We've changed our practice, and we bring it, the annual meeting votes to leave it at the discretion of the board in early August to set the date for the annual meeting. At this time, based on kind of the schedules and also working with Baird Financials to be able to assist us with stand-in services to report to you our budget, we would like to propose that the regular board meeting date of September 15th become the annual community meeting that would start at 6 p.m. and that your regular scheduled board meeting for September would move to the 22nd. That would give you an opportunity to take feedback from the community, have a discussion on the 22nd, and by statute, you must adopt a formal budget during your October board meeting.
Board, any comments on this one? Any thoughts? Are you good with that?
It works with my schedule. I also really like separating those meetings. They're both, can be really heavy meetings, and I like having them on separate nights.
I am unavailable September 15th. I'm out of town.
Yeah, and just for awareness, that's the annual meeting, so it's not necessary for a quorum of the board to be there. So we're good.
And are you good for the 22nd?
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Somebody want to take this one?
I move to approve the annual meeting to be scheduled for Wednesday, September 15th, 2021 at 6 p.m. and the regular meeting moved to September 22nd, 2021 at 7 p.m.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. We are now on information discussion, item A, maintenance and repair update regarding the February 15th, 2022 referendum.
Yes, in my introductory comments about what's good news around the district, shared that we're, I think, at the on the edge of what I could see as the golden years for our Prescott School District, both from a facility standpoint, academic standpoint, and curricular programming. In order to do that, we need to be able to take care of the facilities that we have. Mike Hoika and his team have done an admirable job with regards to keeping our facilities in clean, in good repair, and functioning throughout the different years. But we do know that maintenance and repair, just like anybody's house, there are bills that come due, and we have the middle school that has original foundation of 1929 has been added on a couple times every 20 years, and then in 2004 had the major addition and some renovation. But it's now 2021, and we have a roof that needs some repair. We started with some tuck pointing, and we also have unit ventilators in the classrooms that are beyond life expectancy. And so when you get into Malone, it's built in 1963. We currently do not have an air handler system that is coordinated, nor is the whole building on dehumidification and air conditioning. So one of the challenges you have is you're trying to air condition 3/4 of the building, and you have the gymnasium that also is our cafeteria, and you have students eating in there and also having gym, and it gets pretty hot, especially in early September and the shoulder months. So we have identified for a 10-year plan. We, as a board, you have identified Fund 46 and began the process where you have a trust fund to put money toward many of the capital investments that we need to keep our buildings safe and viable working and learning environment. In order to make this work, we also want input from our stakeholders. And so we had a external audit done by SDS Architects. A year ago, you hired a project management company, Market & Johnson, and we now want an opportunity for individuals from our community to participate in a facility advisory committee. And Mike, after I kind of describe kind of the objective of what this committee is and share a little bit, if you would help out with a little bit of the process and kind of the timeline that we have, and I'll have that coming up. But basically, we need our community, and we need different stakeholders, both individuals that are parents within the community, but also individuals that are paying taxes to invest in the overall citizen and future leaders of Prescott community. We do want to kind of work together, and the goal is that they will, individuals on this committee will meet 4 to 5 times, 60 to 90-minute meetings. They would be presenting at the annual meeting on September 15th, just identified, and then also at the October and November board meetings. The board must pass a resolution on the dollar amount and the scope of work no later than, I believe, December 6th, and so to cover for possible snow days and to include Baird Financial, Market & Johnson, and give you an opportunity for input. We are targeting December 1st, 2021 to have the resolution that would be reviewing 3 viable options that the Facility Advisory Committee would put forward to you to achieve maintenance and repair. Here are some of just kind of the pictures from across our district. What we're looking at is HVAC, that's our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Most of our schools have those rooftop units. One of the things is that our roofs also are leaking or within a year or two of needing to be replaced. So we are, when you look at Malone Intermediate, it has the largest square footage. We're looking potentially, and now again, these prices are from 2019, and the price of oil and petroleum that is part of the tarring process have gone up, but we're looking at a roof replacement of $1.5 million just for the roof. And so when you start to look at a generator that's not up to code, we have electrical panels, our plumbing and bathrooms are not ADA compliant. We do service all students. Currently, Malone Elementary, we do have 3 students that are wheelchair bound. And so when they're looking at either being able to use our cafeteria, gym, bathrooms, and sinks, that becomes an obstacle. And by law, we are required to make sure that they are accessible. Becomes a little bit more of a challenge as they hit into the middle school. On the far right, you can see some of the brickwork, and we're looking at tuck pointing. We did a lot of tuck pointing on the middle school building a year ago. If your envelope of your building, if it's not caulked well, if the windows leak, the doors leak, you have water infiltration, which leads to some of the challenges that we've experienced in Prescott with regards to mold and having to redo and shutter our middle school facility for a couple of years as we rebuilt that to be functional again. So, Mike, I just wanted to kind of share this slide, what we're looking for and kind of the timelines. And if you could just kind of walk through what you're hoping for as the representative of the board. And we also will have 2 board members that would sit on that. And we just wanted to make sure that the community identifies and knows who's going to be sitting on that committee.
Yeah, as far as board members, we're up to 2. We can't have more than that. So we're hoping to have at least, one representative from the board so we can have coverage from a board level on that. The committee, what we're really going for is a wide demographic of the community, and that could range from age, gender, and just different segments of the population that have different beliefs. We want to try to get a good, diverse committee that can help us come up with the best options to bring back to the board. And I think part of it was laid out really well with the timeline of the meetings. So we wanted to, as we try to assemble this committee, come with here's the dates that we're looking at, the criteria that we're expecting as a board to accomplish, and basically try to make it laid out for the facility advisory committee exactly what we're looking for to help get us the absolutely vital input to help us get to a proper ask for the community. It's a big ask. I don't know if I have anything else to say other than that. I don't know if any other board members have anything to add that I'm missing.
Did you share who we volunteer told would be?
Volunteer told from a board level? Yeah, so Pat Block and Vicki Rudolph are gonna sit in on the advisory committee. And you'll both be there. There's some dates that might not work for either of you, but the idea was that we'd have at least one person on the board there at every meeting, and Pat and Vicki will be the 2 main contacts. So that's kind of where we're at right now. That committee we hope to have assembled sometime. I think next week is the goal, is to try to get it assembled, identified and assembled next week, so that first kickoff meeting on the 10th we're ready to go.
And at that time, we'll have both SDS Architects and Market & Johnson. They're going to be the facilitators of this meeting. We have identified every board meeting that is obviously available because we live stream or in person. The opportunity to have additional input to the board so that you understand the progress that is being made.
Yeah, and I, just to reemphasize, Mark and Johnson has done this in the past when we talked to them, when we interviewed them. They've facilitated these types of committees and have some high energy people that are going to come in and really help us kind of help this committee guide them into, what we hope are viable options.
I was just going to add that this was discussed at our public work session when we came up with this advisory and kind of what it would look like. And I see that we've increased some touch points than we initially were talking about, which I think makes total sense because it was a lot. It's taken us, we've been publicly talking about this for years. So it makes a lot of sense that you added some dates on there and stuff like that so people can really kind of dive into it. So it's exciting to see it come and get ready for kickoff, and next week, that's our goal. Okay.
To make sure that we have identified the individuals and that they understand the dates and the commitment.
Is there something that will be sent out to people, like a letter or something, if they are committed to being part of this committee with all these dates and kind of a welcome letter kind of thing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. I think that's
Okay.
it.
All right.
Anybody else have anything to add to this, Pat or Vicki? You're very quiet for being on the Facilities Advisory Committee.
It's got the bad table.
No additional questions, right?
All right. All right, let's move on. Item B is update on annual Clifton Allen Larson financial audit.
So every July, every July within the Prescott Public Schools, we have our annual external audit by Clifton Allen Larson. Every school district by statute must have an annual audit. We have completed that. Baird Financial was on site, and our finance department with Christine Berger. It includes an audit of special education funds and personnel records, HR, and our purchasing and requisitions. There were no major identified errors. You will get your full audit. We still have some lingering questions that go through, but the good news is that we do have and ended with a positive surplus with the fund balance. We have allocated an additional $400,000 to Fund 46. That fund, again, is earmarked solely for capital improvements, and that is a trust fund that will be available to the board in what we hope to be a long-term master plan committee that will follow up after the facility advisory committee. So we're not done yet, and we hope that we'll continue to engage the community over the next decade of what our green space and buildings will look like as we continue to address some future needs, but the board has done an excellent job of seeding that money. In addition, our fund balance will increase. The final numbers still have to be reconciled based on some journal entries. Why that's important is we are within the board policy of trying to make sure that we no longer short-term borrow to pay, and we've hit the third consecutive year where that has no longer been an issue. We no longer have to pay the interest that would be responsible for a short-term loan. We have increased our Moody bond rating, which means that when you go out for bonds, you are getting the best interest rate that's out there. And so we are financially in a good situation, given the bad set of cards that we received from our legislature. But given that, we are able to, I believe, weather the storm for the next biennium, and that was why we were able to provide additional salary increases that were announced earlier tonight, and I think is based on gratitude and the value that the board has placed on the service of our staff and long overdue. It's important for us to be competitive to be able to do that. The final report typically is submitted then with regards to the fund balance has to be available for the annual meeting, and that's why it's set in September. And the final budget for the future year will be set at your board meeting in October.
Any questions on this one, board?
No.
Comments? I got one for you, Dr. Spikuza, and it's so the number, it just rang a bell, and I just want to make sure. I don't know if you can answer this right now or if I'm putting you on the spot. The $400,000 number that went into the fund balance, right?
Fund 46, yep.
Can you just high level, I know we're gonna get into this in the audit, but I mean, that's a pretty big number. Explain why
Yeah.
such a large number.
Yeah, well, a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, with some of the stress I've had to endure, but within the district office, we have, currently, we are working with Baird as a stand-in service for our accounting and also with HR. So we have 3 large positions that we're no longer paying salary or benefits. And so that one-time amount of money we thought would be best served by dedicating it to what we knew were financial costs that are coming up on your 10-year identified plan with regards to SDS. That's what the Facility Advisory Committee will look at. They will get an update on Baird's kind of Finances 101, how you use your current fiscal year budget, how you can use your fund balance, how you can tap into Fund 46 so that we leverage and are the most efficient in being able to make sure that the least amount of money is falling on our taxpayers who just got basically some money back from the state. It also has allowed us to pay back, remember 1 year ago we refunded one of our early bonds by paying it off, and we've saved taxpayers $1 million. So we had a surplus mainly based on some personnel savings. We had budgeted for $25,000 to go in, and we saved that to the end of the books. We had identified to be able to, if we had a surplus, which we were kind of flying blind near the end of the year, in the fog without some instrument panels, but we were able to identify that, and I think it'll set us up well for the future.
Thank you. And all right, so let's move on. We'll move on to item C, COVID-19 and reopening steps, updated.
So, glad you stayed. Thank you for being here. And I, in all sincerity, one of the biggest challenges I think that I've shared is I don't think any of us have the perfect solution. Our goal and promise for you is that we continue to keep you updated. And there are many things that are different this year going in, and some of it has to do with some court cases that were resolved at the Supreme Court, some redefinition about whether or not there are governor orders in place and whether or not how we interact with our public health department. So, and some terminology. And I can tell you, first and foremost, that I am also at times very frustrated trying to navigate what I think is very difficult and sometimes counterintuitive and sometimes not coherent or aligned information coming from the CDC, from the Department of Health, and also from public health. Our goal is to try to make sure that we have a better understanding over the last 2 academic years about more about COVID-19 and what things that we've done to be able to try to mitigate the impact on our students. Overall, what we wanted to make sure is that I hope that as somebody that has a doctorate in educational psychology, somebody that's been working in public education in over 25 years, that our best solution for our students is to be open 5 days a week with our students in our schools with the highly qualified staff that we have. When we talk about education, we're talking about the capital E. It is about academics. It's about the cognitive development of our students, their physical health, their mental health, and social emotional programming that we've invested in over time. We've added counselors, we've added and invested in social emotional programming, K through 8th grade, and we have additional counselors that we've increased the size of that counseling department over time and now have added a dean as well. We're very proud of the programming options that were made, and I would say in a crisis mode. But it is, I think, unfair and not sustainable to ask our teachers to teach both students that are in front of them in a classroom and at home on some type of device simultaneously. That is very, very challenging. I think our staff were exhausted, mentally fatigued and physically fatigued. And so our goal and my proposal to the board is that we have the opportunity to have our doors open. We have the opportunity to have our staff, and we are fully staffed with the exception of coming back, as you heard, with our transportation. And now with the updated rates, we will be advertising for educational assistance. We also want to make sure that when we return, that and understand is that our school board, myself, the administration, and the school board are going to continue to stay in lockstep of making sure that the communication remains consistent and that our focus and goal is about the safety and well-being of our staff and students. We also know that we have to take mitigation efforts. I shared a little bit about what you all have seen is that we are challenged not just with the Alpha variant, but also now Delta, Lambda, and now they say Gamma is coming. We have seen many states, right? New York City, or the state of New York has already identified what they're doing with regards to city employees. We're going to continue to start with our first plan, but we would be foolish and also arrogant to sit here and tell you that we're not going to be prepared, that we may have to pivot based on what we've seen coming across. Our goal is we want every athletic team to be able to start and end their seasons. We want our families to be able to watch their children play in the venues, inside and outside. We want our community to be able to come to all of our venues. And so our goal is to try to identify what worked, what's in place, and what will be able to continue. I do know, based on what has been shared, is that one thing that did not exist until the end of last year was vaccinations. Understand that it's a very personal choice for individuals, and we're not asking anybody to change that personal choice. What we are asking is for people to at least work with us to identify and understand and be informed. Know that we'll give the opportunity, if you so choose, to be vaccinated or have a child 12 and above to be vaccinated. And we will have a clinic on August 3rd, followed by the second dose later in the month. Again, any child, any parent, anybody in the community that would like to be vaccinated can participate on those days. That gives us, and what we know is if we work with a school where 90% of its students are vaccinated, it's going to free up our time. We do not have to worry about sending kids home. We don't have to worry about tracing. So those are some of the things that we'll look at. What's the same? What I can tell you is that we'll continue. People ask about what resources, which doctors, which science are you looking at? It's similar to making a weather prediction. There are different forecasters, different channels, different meteorologists. Sooner or later, we have to say, who are we going to follow? And at this time, we're tied to CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the Wisconsin Department of Health, and Pierce County Public Health. One of the things that often confuse people, confused me, confused our lawyers, confused the school board lawyers, is trying to discern when things were considered guidelines, recommendations, when did they have the teeth of law. There are many people that are paid to do that, and that's not what your superintendent should be spending his or her time on. Our number one job is to focus on learning. Our job isn't to be making and dealing with a pandemic, and that's hard. And so we will continue to make sure that when we can, we are clear about when is it an order, when is it a mandate, when is it a guidance. And so we have linked on our website the CDC primer. That's some of the things that we've had to read through the last few weeks. What I can tell you is even in the CDC primer, they criticized their own organization for the lack of clarity and the ambiguity on the terms that they use that makes the public and also the agencies that are trying to follow and discern when is it guidance and when is it a mandate, that they criticize that the language and the words that they use are confusing and oftentimes at crossroads. So here's what we can tell you, all right, is that we're going to continue to do everything we can to control the things that we can. And so we will continue to make sure that our custodial staff is cleaning and doing deep cleaning, that they're disinfecting, that our buses are sprayed down. We also will be asking our students periodically to do hand washing, right? So those are some of the steps and mitigation steps that will be in place. What's different? This is dramatic. Currently, last year at this time, we were under state mandates and orders. At this time, even with CDC's release last night, it differentiated two things. One, it was guidance. It is not an order, which is different than where we were last fall. Second, it was nuanced. It said if your area, local area or state was in the yellow zone, it was not guidance that they were recommending. Currently, in that map I showed you, we are yellow. And you can follow that every single day either through CDC or Pierce County. So our recommendation at this time is we've had conversations at the end of the school year. You saw how we engaged in summer programming. You see where we are today without masks. At this time, it's going to be our recommendation, based on the information today, right, is that we would start the school year without masks. They are completely optional and available to students or families and to our teachers if they so choose. In addition, we know that there has been a reduction in the authority of the different agencies. At this time, last year, Pierce County Public Health had the authority to close any school or school district based on their determination of either the lack of efforts the school district was using, the number of students that were absent, or the number of infection rates within their boundaries. A Supreme Court ruling in Wisconsin over the summer has now clarified for all of us that Pierce County Public Health does not have that authority. We did not have that information. It was not something that I believe. It was my duty to take a Supreme Court task with regards to Pierce County. But now that that has been defined, we know that we have greater latitude to make the decisions locally based on the 5-member board here and the input both from our parents, our staff, and our nurses. So, a couple other things that will be different is that nutritional services, a couple things. One is bringing back salad bars. So a lot of the prepackaged foods, we couldn't even use, the students weren't allowed to use utensils. We had to have plastic forks. Everything had to be sealed. All of that will go back to regular, you might think, not a big deal, but boy, kids can use those forks for great football, either kicking or field goals. The other thing I did want to mention about nutritional services is that at no cost, all families, regardless of income level, we are not charging for breakfast, nor are we charging for lunch. That is based on the Federal Recovery Act, those dollars, and we are participating in that program. I will ask, and we'll be giving information on the letter that went out to families. It's still important for families that are economically disadvantaged to fill out that paperwork. One, because we do have class fees, and there are reductions for families that fall or would typically qualify for free or reduced lunch. In addition, for athletic fees, we do have reductions. In addition, the legislature is currently looking at funding school districts in the future based on the poverty level. The best indicator of poverty is based on the number of free and reduced lunch. So one of the things we want to make sure is some schools a year ago found a huge drop in the number of students based on free and reduced lunch because people weren't filling out the paperwork. It's important for us. It is private information. It is not accessible to majority of staff unless there's a need to know. So I want to encourage families as they come back to orientation. All of our forms have been updated on our website. We encourage you still to fill that out, both for the benefit of reducing fees for classes as well as for athletics. Earlier tonight, we talked a little bit about in-town busing. We had no in-town busing last year. We believe that based on the parameters that we have, it's the number of days that we have to pull this off, the number of buses in our fleet, and still needing some drivers, we are confident that this is the best plan that we can pull off, Tim can pull off by August 30th. I will ask some patience and grace because I know that we are going to have the buses coming in from the country and we have to load balance, and it is possible the first few days of school there's going to be 20 kids at a bus stop or 20 kids within 2 bus stops, and we're only going to have 10 seats. We will continue to work with all families and get our buses to straighten that out, but know that we do not have the technology nor the personnel to be able to orchestrate all of that by August 30th. But it's not like we're going to ignore it. So we will continue to improve and work on those. If you know of anybody that is interested, one of the benefits of Prescott Public Schools having its own fleet is that we are not driving 8 hours a day. We have morning routes and afternoon. We prefer if they would do both, but we also need subs. We will train anybody at no cost. It does take about 4 weeks to be able to get through the training, the testing, and then the licensure. Mitigation, right? We talked a little bit about unless the board changes. At this time, we currently have run our school. We were able to keep K-5 open, and we did not have mass at that time. I'm sorry, we had mass at that time, but we were able to keep our students in school 5 days a week. We believe that we still have to have some layered prevention. I'm leaving that to both Michael Kosmowski for our intermediate school and Sarah Dusick at the elementary. They are going to continue to look at layered approaches, trying to identify, sometimes out in the playground, we had 4 groups to make sure that they were isolated. We probably don't need to be that specific, but we will try to keep like groups and like grade levels together. But we'll continue to do the things that we talked about, the hand washing, the daily cleaning, the disinfecting, social distancing where and when appropriate. And our lead custodian, Mike Hoyka, grounds and supervision, has worked with increasing the air filtration. So we do have fresh air cycles that have been accelerated. The one school that we're challenged by right now is just the middle school with the unit ventilators, which I hope our facility advisory committee can help us work through. WIA participation, I'm going to ask Andrew to kind of walk you through this. Remember, we talked about CDC, DHS, and Pierce County. WIA, in order for our children to be able to participate within a season and postseason, it's dictated by WIA. Doesn't matter what my opinion is, doesn't matter what Andrew's. We can advocate for changes, but the likelihood of Prescott changing that mammoth of an organization is pretty little. But I did want him to be able to share with you the difference with regards to in-season and postseason.
Yeah, thank you. So we received the guidance from the WIAA, and it is guidance for regular season. They use terms like recommended, strongly encouraged. They want us to follow our local health departments and our governing body, and based on the Supreme Court ruling this summer, regular season protocols for our athletic teams would fall under the school board. However, postseason, the WIA is saying we shall follow quarantine guidelines from our local health department. I have asked the WIAA for clarity. Is that a mandate? And I have yet to receive a response. Girls golf postseason starts at the end of September. We're actually hosting the regional. That is very important for us to know very soon. So right now, regular season, quarantining, the works falls under whatever the school board decides. Postseason, as of now, based on their language, we're interpreting it as whatever the local health department states, and the WIA does put quarantine guidelines in the memo stating that if it's unclear, this is what we shall follow in postseason. So I'm getting clarity on that. Also looking for clarity from WIA and when a sport team crosses that line from regular season to postseason, because now that's not really clear. So we're hopefully I will have more clarity for you all by August 18th.
Can I just really, while you're up there on the WIA with the postseason stuff, this is all new territory for all of us. I know, like with postseason, they're saying words like shall, so that means they're going to implement, these sets of rules and protocols that we have to follow. By August, can we look into that to see if that's even legal? Are they allowed to do that? Is that something that we can look at, or do we know the answer to that already?
What the WIA will say is that to be a member institution, we set the rules in our governing body, and that we have to follow them. And obviously, there's other schools that have questions, so I'm going to ask the other ADs in the conference to see how they're looking at it from their district, and maybe we can team up, write a memo with WIA for clarity. But as of right now, they're unwilling to give me clarity. They're just saying, this is what the memo says, and the word shall kind of implies you have to do this. But they're also willing to be clear. So who knows? But postseason starts sooner than a lot of people think in our fall sports.
Yeah, and I bring it up because I'd be curious to know if we got a legal interpretation of that. And
the legal, similar to what Andrew said, is we don't have to participate in WIA, and they can make the rules, and as a member of that organization. And what I would say is this is where they're starting, and who knows where it'll end up. And I think a lot of it will have to do with what happens over the next few months with regards to whether or not there are outbreaks or not.
I will also say the staff member and their executive board that does all the rules, they have somebody new, and their first day is on Monday. So I'm kind of waiting for them to get in place, and I'm going to resend them an email to say, we got this memo from your predecessor, clarify what postseason means for us, please. I asked them for our school board and superintendent, we need clarity, and so we're still waiting for that.
And then lastly, I'm sorry, and I know
I appreciate the question.
While we're on the topic of the WIA, I just want to get it up. So for the regular season, I know, it's recommendations. Do they have the authority to change that into orders if they so choose? Do we know that answer? And I'm not asking you to,
we can follow up.
I would say they would, but I think right now, I don't think they really want a piece of it. They're claiming that the postseason is sponsored and run by the WIA as an entity, whereas our regular season really is run by the schools and the conferences under their umbrella. They could turn around and do that, but with football season starting next week, there's no appetite for that, but it could change.
Thank you.
Andrew, thank you. Obviously, more to come. As soon as, this information, once the season starts, all I would say is I wish we didn't have to deal with this. I wish we didn't have to deal with it for the last 3 years. and it keeps changing. It's fluid, and we'll keep you all updated on that. I think the biggest thing that you'll see, again, is at this point, the regular season is under our control or board control, and probably our middle border. Once you get into postseason, it's a little bit more restrictive. Where it usually kicks in is about isolation and quarantine. And so we'll get to that when we talk a little bit about still trying to navigate the role and function of Pierce County and how they interface with school districts. This information was brought to superintendent's attention on July 21st. It is a legal conference for all of Wisconsin School Board. There was a lot of a lack of clarity with regards to a CDC order, not a guideline, that does have legal interpretation with regards to ramifications for withholding federal funds and also fines that can occur for districts. It is similar to the national transportation. If any of you have been on an airplane, doesn't matter what your opinion is, whether or not it makes logical sense or not, but it has been clarified for school boards that school buses are deemed under the order of CDC. So although we are proposing to start the school year not having masks inside our buildings, if students are on a bus, it is a legally restricted requirement of CDC that both our bus drivers and students have to be masked, as well as for extracurricular activities. So that means for sporting events, travel between events, golf, they have to wear a mask, regardless if you own your own fleet or if you outsource. So basically on the 21st, the legal update from the Wisconsin Legal Counsel, are masks required on school buses? Yes, passengers and drivers must wear a mask on school buses operated by public or private institutions. Again, we do have some of the things that are within our control. If you see, this is the breakout of the current Pierce County statistics. Individuals that are over 65, nearly over 86% of our community that's over 65 have been vaccinated. You can see it decreases by age group. Obviously, a lot to do with vaccines were not available for students until recently, but we do have the opportunity to have children vaccinated 12 and above. We respect and understand that's a personal choice. And at this time, we are just encouraging people to be informed, understanding that the amount of time and the interface with Pierce County on contact tracing and things like that takes away time from families. It's disruptive for families, and also it takes teacher and administrative time. The more students who are vaccinated, we no longer have to dedicate that time to those types of processes. We can focus on learning, and we can focus on the referendum. So we would like to try to encourage and expand our focus on learning as we kick off the year and try to have fewer of our time and focus on COVID, assuming that we can keep everybody safe.
Rick, can I just jump back? I'm sorry for cutting into but about I think it's important to understand the context. The legal update from the WASB about the CDC's order. Was that, can you just, a little background on what that meeting was and who was in it?
Yeah, so basically when new information or interpretation that it was unclear when CDC had released its order about national transportation, about whether or not school buses fell under that jurisdiction. There were a couple back and forth. Obviously, you're talking not just the state of Wisconsin. All states were trying to clarify that. So this is not a Prescott ruling. This is a state ruling where the lawyers that represent you as a board have worked and come to the conclusion and interpretation with the national lawyers that the CDC order does oversee and takes precedent, and that we are basically, if we were not to follow this, it puts you then in 3 categories of challenges. One, you would lose your immunity for potential lawsuits. Second, your insurance company has stated that they would not protect you for any issue if it was to be challenged, and their legal representation has given their ruling that that would be part of their contract, that they would be able to step aside from any protection. And then we are working with our own local attorneys. So all districts, all superintendents on this call, we, again, got this information only last week. And at this time, unless something were to change, we would have to abide with it, unless you want to say, as a board, you would want to violate a legal standing from a national organization. The challenge I have is I have to bring that forward to you as a board. You have to decide. What I would ask as an administrator is, if you're not going to follow this law, then I would have to understand, if I'm trying to administer the duties of this office, which laws to follow, which not, and that would be, I would be coming back to you a lot, and that again would distract. If you want to pay me to do that, I'm happy to accept it, but I don't think that's a good use of your time or my time or our taxpayers' money.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to clarify where that information came from and how it got disseminated.
Yep.
Because this is pretty much the first time we're hearing this as a board.
Yep. So again, choice is out there, but we want to make it as easy if people want to. One thing that many of our conversations tonight, many of the inputs could all disappear if we had a higher percent of our students and staff that were vaccinated. On Tuesday, August 3rd, from 3 to 6 p.m., we'll be having vaccinations available at the Prescott High School gym. The second dose is going to be followed on August 24th. The Pfizer regimen is 2 doses, and that's available for students 12 and above. If you want the 1 shot, that is Johnson & Johnson, but it is not eligible for students until you're 18 or above. That date, due to some other extracurricular activities, would be at the Malone Intermediate Gym. A lot of information. Try to describe what's similar, what's different. Questions that you have, anything circling in your head, anything that you would like us to follow up on prior to August 18th, bringing information back to you for a reopening plan.
Yeah, Pat, you got questions down there you want to start with, or?
Yeah, hopefully maybe we can get a chance to go around the room.
Yep.
Again here too.
Yep.
But I think, man, a lot to take in. One thing I'm wondering if we should consider with all the moving pieces and parts, do we need to think about scheduling, regularly scheduled, board check-ins to address any, evolving situations that might come up in lieu of waiting to, a regular monthly board meeting? Is that something we should consider as we move into the fall? I'm not saying yes or no. I think we should think about it, talk about it. I think with that, Mike, I'm it for questions right now at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to Pat and just jump in if you want. Tanya?
Yeah, a lot of my questions were asked as we went. Mike, thanks for asking some of those questions. One of the things that I read through all the CDC's new guidelines, I had some last week and yesterday, I think it was, and something that I've noticed a switch was related to, and I appreciate it, was related to the rates of infection in a certain area. So you showed that map. and they call it substantial or high is when the recommendations really come into play. And so as you're looking at those plans, something I liked that we did last year was we had those plans made. We did that through multiple board meetings, public board meetings, where we came up with those kind of diagrams that helped us describe, if we get to this point, this is what we might need to do. And I'm wondering if that's something as an administrative team, as you're looking and you brought it up, what's plan 2, A, B, C, kind of down the line, if we could see that of kind of pre-planning. I think it also helps our community know, okay, as infection rates go, these are kind of things that we're going to be having conversations about. It's obviously not a decision point, but there's those conversations for us to begin having, and community can kind of be aware of. So that's something I'd be interested in. Pat, as far as having more, I don't necessarily think we need to have more meetings. It has to be public though, if we have something like that. But just some kind of communication would be great. As you, I would just say, Rick, you send us stuff all the time. I probably read 10. This stack of papers is like our weekly email communication about what's going on legally, CDC-wise, and all that stuff. So I actually feel really good about some of that. The thing that I would like to see, and I did see some school districts do this, was if we had some kind of, and I think some of our community members have brought this up at other meetings, is having some kind of spot on our website where we can kind of see our Prescott School District, what's happening here. You know, do we have cases, do we not? Because of, you know, River Falls had their outbreak with the college, and then how does that affect us? I really would like to see what's going on with our staff as well as our kids, if we could kind of update that weekly or bi-weekly or whatever that looks like. So those are kind of my takeaways, and I know next month, really, I think the 18th is when you really will be prepared with more information. And then I guess the only other thing to bring up was the ESSER, right? The ESSER dollars, and part of that, to receive those dollars, which is what we're using a lot of those dollars for interventionalists and stuff like that. So those are very important dollars for us to get our kids back to learning, and some of our kids are going to need more direct instruction than others, and so that's what those dollars are used for. But some of those requirements for us to access those dollars is that we have plan B and C set up. And so I mean, I know that we are having to do those things in order to accept those dollars. And I just would look forward to seeing those hopefully on the 18th, so we can start kind of forecasting, I guess, if we need to.
So, good point. And I, just to expand on that, within 90 days of when Prescott Public Schools will be able to access kind of the recovery emergency dollars, referred to as ESSER, we are one of the districts they have to report out on our enrollment and participation and access to curriculum and instruction that was only on site last year. I want to thank Michael Kosmowski and Josh Figge and Kyle Igo. It was by student, by day, by period, and that had to be aggregated and put forward. The benefit is our K-5, because we were present and accessible, went quite straightforward. But obviously the disruptions that we had with purple groups, green groups, A and B days, different amount of minutes, we relived that hardship, and we know that that's something that we're trying to alleviate next year. But to Tanya's point, we must have more than a single plan. We have to say these are the steps that we'll take should outbreaks increase, and we have to be able to present that and ask for public input. We are looking at those dollars being available by November. That means that we have 90 days from November to have a plan. That's not going to work. And so obviously August 18th we'll have site plans. We will have that listed on our website as well as during our orientation. Obviously the age of students, we know 100% of our students, K-5, won't be vaccinated. So what Michael and his team and teachers are going to put in place is going to be different than what secondary will do, okay? But we do know, kind of what we talked about, is that other than buses, there is no external mandate with regards to face coverings. We'll continue to do those other steps. Other questions?
Tony, you have anything else?
No.
Vicki?
I just want to make sure that since this new or not new, but the legal definition and the ramifications of the masking on the bus, that we just get that out there for families to know that the masks will be required on the bus, not only for back and forth from school, but also for extracurricular transportation.
Exactly.
And that could be one of those updates that Tanya was talking about, putting on the website so that we have that available for families to see all the time. But I know there's, you know, you've got a list of specific families that will be using the bus, so.
Rick, while we were talking about ESSER, I had a question about ESSER dollars and how they're determined. Our plans, the content of the plan, does that dictate the money on what we get, or is it just the fact we got to have a plan B and a plan C? It's not there. Are they?
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? Where I'm going with this is like, are they going to tell us what we can and can't do to get money?
No, we just have to check the boxes to make sure that we meet the criteria, that we've thought through what are the additional steps. What I can tell you is the state is still trying to interpret the federal guidelines of how much money Prescott will receive. ESSER 3, I can tell you, initially it was $500,000. That has now been cut to $140,000. So the amount of effort going in, if it was $500,000, that would have been huge and significant with regards to the type of programs that we'd put in place, or one-time money that you put on HVAC, air handlers. For 140, again, this is one-time money, and so that how we will spend it will be determined here and with community input, but it's not a sizable amount of money based on what was supposed to be emergency relief funds.
Okay, and so I got a couple more things here. Vaccinations, right? We talk a lot about it. We encourage it. We strongly encourage people to get vaccinated. I get that, but it's super clear for everybody that it is a personal choice to get vaccinated. And I think the school district and the school board will respect that. And my question to you, Rick, about vaccinations is, so we ask these questions. We got a survey that asks it. What is I know you talk about it, but I really want to drive this home. What's the information being used for? Is it to help dictate what goes on in the classrooms with like vaccinations versus who's not vaccinated? Are we changing anything in the classroom based on kids that are not vaccinated or anywhere else? Or is it strictly just contact tracing?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Let's start by building. If we already know 100% of our elementary and intermediate students by default can't be vaccinated, we know that we're going to take more precautions with regards to just how we set up the classrooms, physical distancing, and we also know that our staff, it's going to be more important for them if they have any, as we staff and work with HR, we have some staff that are compromised. And so we have to know the information a little bit that will play out differently at the elementary and intermediate school. We do have to provide accommodations for those employees. Once you get to middle school and high school, if students are vaccinated, again, if 90% of the students were vaccinated, we then know we can focus on learning and we don't have to do contact tracing. If a child is vaccinated, by default, they're no longer going to be contact traced and they no longer would have to go to quarantine.
And contact tracing, just for the record, is an enormous amount of time to go through that every time there's a case. And it takes I just want to call that out, so that I understand why you'd want to know that information, because if you can shortcut some of that process to save time so administrators and teachers can actually continue to do what they do best,
right,
which isn't contact tracing.
And I do want to clarify, we have a meeting next week internally with our administrative team and our nursing. I also have set up a meeting to work with AZ Snyder from Pierce County. It is, and I want to be clear about this, isolation and quarantine mean different things. Isolation is that a student or an adult has tested positive for COVID. Pierce County is the one that has the authority to isolate an individual to be home. Quarantine is the process of identifying people that are in close contact. At this point, technically, Pierce County is responsible for contact tracing and also for making that determination. That has been a huge detriment and resource, both financially for our district and also for personnel, for which we are not reimbursed by the county that gets paid for it, and it's things that distract from our primary mission. Our goal is to work with Pierce County, but I can tell you that one of the challenges we have, and now the legal authority that Pierce County has, is that they have guidance about close contact. CDC just changed its guidance from 6 feet to 3 feet. Pierce County has not. Pierce County has the authority to make it a legal quarantine, and sometimes has and has not. At this point, our goal is to be able to come back to you as a board to clarify under what condition and who quarantines. Prescott Public Schools does not quarantine a family. It's a directive from Pierce County. And so our job is to make sure that we want to make sure that all families, we think it's an obligation. If somebody has been identified as COVID positive, as a worker in our district or a classmate, we will share that information out so that families have the ability to decide, do I want to withhold my child because I'm concerned that it might be spreading? But if they are not symptomatic, we are currently looking at that they would not be sent home or identified as needing quarantine. That is something we still have to work out and make sure that it goes back to, it's that double-edged sword. Pierce County could make a legal order to quarantine somebody. And it goes back to, are we going to follow orders? And again, orders have impact on immunity, legal issues, and penalties. It's a lot more than I ever wanted to have to engage in based on my focus of education. But I just wanted to let you know, right now, isolation is determined solely by Pierce County, and they have the authority to do that. We will honor isolation. If you're isolated, we can't let you in our building.
So simply put, isolated is a confirmed case.
Exactly.
Quarantine is close contact.
Correct.
And at the moment, close contact individuals are not, there's no order to quarantine close contact individuals. Did I get that right?
Unless you're in a household. So if a sibling or a parent was isolated, then there is that. But we have to work out with, at this point, we'll have to ask, Pierce County can change them, quarantine into orders.
I get that.
Yep.
Is that whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated? Does it matter? Or is it only for vaccinated individuals that you...
Unvaccinated.
Well,
I think those are questions we can get out there. I want to make sure that we're really clear with what the expectations are.
And they could change. If you're vaccinated, you would not have to quarantine at this time. That is what CDC Pierce County has identified. And so that's why we've been at least making sure people knew if they wanted to not have to be quarantined. We're still navigating that. But if I'm on a football team and the center's positive and I'm vaccinated, I will not have to quarantine.
Okay. And I'm getting to my point, and I want to make sure that we're really clear with what the kind of the environment is right now that we're dealing with. And just lastly, this is more of a comment than anything. We have a lot of recommendations coming from the CDC. We have a lot of recommendations coming from Pierce County. And they are just that, they're recommendations, right? So I think that's a huge change in where we were last year from this year. We obviously will take into consideration recommendations when we're making decisions as a board, but I'll say personally, I'm for freedom of choice, right? I mean, we should have masks. Please don't clap. I don't want that. Thank you, but it's really. I believe the school district wants this too, and it's such a passionate subject. We all want to move on with this, with our lives and get back to normal. But masks optional. You know, if you want to wear a mask, go ahead. Vaccinations. If you want to get vaccinated, it's encouraged, and I think it's something that I support the school district encouraging is vaccinations, but it's ultimately the family's choice. To do, and it does help when we know if you're vaccinated or not for mitigation purposes and time-saving efforts. I think that's super important to help keep our administrators and everybody else kind of rolling with academics and probably discipline as well. But I just those are my thoughts as an individual on the board. I'm really looking forward to next month seeing the full plan. But I hope we center it around what is a recommendation versus what is an order. It irks me that the CDC still has an order that we have to follow. I'm not advocating in any way that we should go around it, and I would, I'll let the other board members comment on this separately if they want. But an order is an order, and if it supersedes us, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can have an opinion on it all day long, it doesn't matter. So those are my 2 cents. Does the board have anything else? Do you guys want to jump in here?
So back, our next meeting, and Mike, you kind of alluded to this, but Rick, you're probably way ahead. Can we see some sort of a matrix on the guidance, the recommendations, and the ordering differences between the institutions we say we're going to follow? So, for example, if there's a difference between what Pierce County Public Health is saying versus DHS or CDC, can we see that in some sort of a matrix or a chart?
We can attempt I think on core things, what I'm a little bit concerned about is CDC already changed something last night. So by the time we show you what's similar and what's different, it could change.
I understand. We're also saying that we're adopting 3 different institutions that we're going to follow guidance from, and if they have differing guidance, we need to understand where they're different and which one we're going to follow and which one we aren't. I also have a question, and we don't need to answer it tonight. Are we confident that these are the 3 institutions that we're going to take guidance from? Are there any others that need to be considered? Are there any on this list that we should be considering?
We had the WHO, I think. WHO was part of it from last year. That's the only difference I see from last year's that we announced. Good or bad, I don't know. But
And I think the reason we dropped WHO is I do believe that every continent is slightly different with regards to how it's situated, how the different countries share a continent that I don't know if it's locally as helpful for us. Obviously, CDC and WHO, kind of follow. I think for us, if you have a better or another one that we should put in our library to follow, but I think sooner or later we have to kind of limit. I do want to say that we're using that to influence our plan unless it's an order. So if it's a guideline, we're taking it into consideration, but we're looking at geographically how we're set up. And then for plan B, C, and D will be how does it impact? And so our first obligation is to make sure that we are staffed, we have enough subs, and if our employees are vaccinated, it eliminates a lot of the heartache we have to worry about with regards to who's going to be down. And quarantine was really difficult on everybody. It was difficult for staffing. Our staff had to get sent home 4 or 5 times. Middle school kids got sent home 4 or 5 times. That's really, it was disruptive enough, but it's disruptive when you're quarantining. So we're trying to at least reduce the number of white noise and the variance in the models. And I think we'll try to at least, maybe on the core things about distance, masks. I think somebody earlier did talk about that the American Academy of Pediatricians has identified, has recommended children age 2 and above, even if they're vaccinated, to be masked. It's not that we're avoiding that, it's just we're still knowledgeable about it, and I think we'll bring it forward, we discuss it, and ultimately our community will still be able to have input.
One other thing that came up, or I was thinking about as we were talking, was coming back on the 18th, I think is the date, but having some sort of plan in place for when kids do need to be quarantined or isolated. I know we had learning plans last year that, you know, they learned from home oftentimes, they videoed in. We're not doing that this year is my understanding, because teachers cannot sustain that. So I am curious if it is ordered that a student was isolated or quarantined, what that learning plan would look like, because it is, you're missing 2 to 3 weeks of school. It is really disruptive. So I'd be curious to know kind of how that plays out.
And thank you, because I wanted to make sure that is a big change. And I think it's important and you talked about it, it's what is able to be sustained. And I don't think we would be able to retain our staff if we were trying to do both on-site and off-site learning simultaneously. So I wanted to make sure that as a board, you understand our proposal heading into the year is you're with us and you're on site, and we'll provide the services here because we think it's the best place for them to be for all 5 areas that I've talked about. And it also is going to be the way that we can efficiently manage our budget and also the health and well-being of our staff. Now, once you're here, if you do get isolated, it's similar. We've had to do homebound programming. We learned a lot, and we have technology. So we're not going to leave somebody who might have to be home for multiple days and say, we'll see you in 10 days. We will have options that'll be available, but those options are going to differ by the grade level. And so those are some of the things that we'll continue to work and refine. But the opportunity for somebody to be both at home and students in the classroom concurrently, I don't think we can deliver on at this time.
I think we should look at a separate date for this. I don't know what you guys think, but this feels like it could be a long and grueling topic that could go on, and to try to jam it into an existing meeting is gonna, well, we're already here till 10 o'clock just talking about this. So I think, you know, we should maybe consider that and try to find some dates. If you guys are interested, we can work offline to find a date and make sure it's obviously posted well enough in advance so people can join. And you know, unless we can get all 5 board members there, I wouldn't move it, because I don't think we want to run it with 3 or 4 people. It has to be all 5 of us, especially if we have all 5 of us at the August meeting. But I think we got to consider it.
Yeah, so one thing I would just say, I totally hear what you're saying. I just know that it's going to take time for our administrators to put these plans together. And we also want enough time to let parents know what this looks like so they can make choices.
It could be the same week if it worked out. I mean, I think just separating it out as part of a different meeting, hopefully.
Or is it possible to move our regular scheduled board meeting back a week? I mean, that might be the better. I don't know those options.
I think we look at dates that work for all of us, and try to figure out something. But I do want to do that, especially if we could get all 5 at the next regular board meeting date, and just flip-flop like we did with the annual meeting, maybe?
Which I know there's other timelines with things too.
Yep.
Because, for example, the annual meeting, stuff like
So
that.
obviously we need Steve here to weigh in on that stuff too, but. All right, anybody else have any comments? Pat? Good?
I do need clarification, though. I just want to make sure as we move forward, understanding certain things are orders. If I have to plan for whether or not the board would decide that we would not follow certain orders, it's important for me to know now to be able to, not that you're voting, but I'm just asking for, if you're understanding the implications of not following an order, I have to be able to then take different steps. And I just want to make sure if I'm going to be spending time.
Yep.
Well, for me, I think we need to follow orders, the guidance, the recommendations. Those are the things I'd like to have more of those discussions on. I mean, I don't want to put us in, just like last year, I don't want to put us in a legally binding spot, financially binding spot, harm a child, there's things that I think we have to follow, like the busing mandate for right now with masks. Regardless of our opinion of it, that's something that's out there as an order, and I'm good with following that. But the recommendations and the guidelines, like for example, moving to 3 feet social distancing, right? Like those are things I think that are more of a discussion.
Okay.
Pat?
That's me.
I would agree. Yeah. Vicky?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yep, I already stated my opinion. Okay.
All right. Thank you. That I think will be helpful.
I do think you should also, for the Plan B and C, factor that in. So like, the CDC changes every week. So, I mean, something could be a recommendation, the next day it could be an order. And I think making sure that the plan accounts for that, we got to act quickly and follow guidance, obviously, after you vet it out and make sure it's in order. I think
Correct.
that's, we got to make sure that it is what it is.
And it could be, and I don't want to plan for you guys, but if we did have some kind of website where we had, our rates that are actually impacting our district right there and readily available, it could also be a good place just to list, here's current orders, and then here's current recommendations or guidelines and separate it that way. Because a lot of times, you get information, it goes straight to you, and then you disseminate it to us, and then it's your team. But if we had a place that we could put it so families could see the difference as well, that would be helpful, I think.
Is that what you need?
That's
All
very
right.
helpful. Thank you.
All right, let's get on with it. Item D, Freedom Flight.
All right. So this is more just an advertisement, but there is an individual that wanted to use district property to have tethered hot air balloons. It's to raise money for POW and Missing in Action, and also help out the American Legion. That date is Sunday, September 19th, which is just after Prescott Days. And then I have just learned, and I apologize, I don't have the exact date, but during Prescott Days, Crazy About Baseball is doing its helicopter baseball drop. And so the raffle tickets are going quickly. It's online. It's during Prescott Days. I apologize, I don't have the exact date that they're doing it. But I just wanted to make sure the board knows you have policies about making sure that individual external agencies have their riders, that they have insurance, put us on additional, and the city also has an ordinance about helicopters, so it's a partnership between us and the city. But I just wanted to make sure you understood that as long as they meet those criteria, those events will take place.
Okay. Item E, update upcoming August meetings.
Yes. All right.
Is that on there?
Yeah.
We just talked about this one. Flopping the balloons.
Oh, well. I had a slide for it, but I can just recite them. One of the things about August is it gets really busy. So next week, we talked a little bit about, I will be at CISA, which is our organization of 42 other districts. It's a legal summit. I'm sure I'll learn a lot more about interpretations of the rules and also how that plays out. That's on Monday, August 2nd. We'll be out of the office with that. Our district teacher leadership team under the direction of Teaching and Learning and Michael Kosmowski will be meeting on Tuesday and Thursday. It's the 10th and 12th. We did participate in state testing. We do have results back from the ACT. We also have information back on our advanced placement. We have Wisconsin Forward, and we also have FastBridge. Our goal is to basically make sure that we develop plans in place and allocate resources and personnel to make sure that we make up and accelerate the learning for our students this year. On the 17th and the 18th, all of our new staff will be participating in first just getting to know and signing all the paperwork. They work with also Kiwanis and the Chamber of Commerce to kind of welcome them to the Prescott community. The week of August 23rd through the 26th is when our staff, 100% of our staff are back on site, and we begin to plan both just overall what the kind of theme for the year will be, and it'll be nice to resurrect that based on we were unable to do that as a group in fall of 2020. So that's exciting. And then one of the things we continue to ask and hold the date from kind of an Olympic theme of the Olympics are going on. We do know that having disruption of the academic year over the last 2 years has created a need where students are going to be in buildings they haven't been in. So our second grade students will be at Malone Intermediate, our fifth grade students will be up at the middle school. We'll have high school kids that were on AB days, and what we would really like is on August 30th and 31st for two purposes. One, relationship building. We know that a strong relationship with our students and is imperative. Our students being able to interact with same age students has been curtailed, and so on the 30th and 31st of August, that will give us an opportunity to run our buses, to provide food, breakfast and lunch, and get a soft opening to our school year. It's our ability to reach out, build relationships, and have students engage and get back into just kind of what I would say is understanding the norm of being in a school with 100 other classmates. Those are not mandatory dates in the state of Wisconsin. The official start of school is September 1, but it's on a Wednesday, and then it leads into a 3-day holiday. We've had enough disruptions, and so we are and had changed our teacher contract to include August 30th and 31st as part of their overall contract. We hope to have exciting things, and we will be sharing that information out from each principal. It also will help the financial status of Prescott Public Schools. In my introduction, I shared with you is that we receive no additional money over the next 2 years. When you run summer school, students that participate are counted as full-time enrolled, and we are funded based on full-time enrolled. So in order to kind of, you are doing both a favor to our students and staff to build relationships by participating August 30th and 31st, as well as on the financial side. So I will encourage you to stay aware, and we hope to see many of our students on site during those days. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rick. We are now moving on to item 9, recognition of visitors. Anybody in the audience care to be recognized? I think, just heads up, Kyle, I think, runs a sprinkler test at 10:15 here, so. Right, Kyle?
Stand closer to the mic. Sorry, Mike. Sorry to
You're moving pretty good.
No,
you're right.
For those that don't know me, I'm Joe Roll. I live out in Clifton Township. Father of 6 kids, 3 of which are still moving through the district. I've had kids in this school district for 20 years. I've attended a lot of school board meetings over the years for various issues, and the themes that never go away are busing is always a challenge and evolving thing, funding the busing, funding facilities, funding maintenance, and then tonight we get to talk a lot about COVID mitigations. And I'm glad that I waited till now to come up here because I'm actually impressed and surprised at how much the board, Dr. Spikuza, have looked into some of the legal questions around what we've been doing for the last 18 months. Because as a parent, I can tell you that you will get nothing from my children but knowing the rules and following your rules. But as a parent, I'll guarantee you that if the district on their own decides to violate their HIPAA rights or civil rights, I'm going to hold you accountable for it. So, in your consideration of what's coming up in these upcoming meetings, keep that in mind. There's other people that can hold you accountable in court, and it could be the electors of the school district that need to look at supporting this upcoming referendum. A real win for our district would be look at how to make this coming year as normal as possible and how to keep bureaucrats that aren't part of our community out of our business. So, and as far as the direction that Dr. Spikuza is seeking from this board, we look to you, school board members, to give him the direction he needs because I think there may be some directives you don't want to follow. And unless there truly is litigation or funding tied to them, most people are not going to understand why the heck we're doing it. So that's all I got for you tonight. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else care to be recognized? Need a pillow? All right. We need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. Everybody appreciates it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle.